Hello everyone, I greet in the name of God Almighty. My name is Apostle Newton Silas, and today we have a very interesting video to react to, and this one says that does the Quran recommend marriages, that is concubine in Islam, and it's actually a series. I believe that we all are going to learn from this, and this was done by Dr. Shabir Ali. So if today happens to be the first time of you checking out my channel, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and follow me on my Facebook and Instagram. And if you have any video you want me to react to, don't forget to drop it at the comment section and I'm going to check it out. So guys, before we get on to the video, I'm a theologian and I make this video not to discredit anyone's religion. This is basically for educational purposes, and I believe that at the end of this video we all are going to learn from it. So let's get down to this video and check this out.
Dr. Shabir, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
My pleasure to be on.
We're continuing our series on concubines in Islam, and now we turn to the Quran. And perhaps this is the hardest part of our conversation, Dr. Shabir, because the Quran talks about slavery in many passages. And in particular, the Quran talks about marriage to concubines. So I thought you could talk about that a little bit.
Yes, it is important that we look at the verses which show that there is an encouragement, at least, for the concubines to be married. And then we can, look at the counter to that, or the flip side, later on. But let's look at the verses and see the broader picture here about the encouragement towards getting the concubines married. Well, that's a bit of a kind of an anachronism of terms. It's
the female slave.
Female slaves. Let's say the female slaves to be given away in marriage, or to be married perhaps to their masters, rather than to be treated as concubines and just simply by the virtue of the man owning his female slave, he has the right to take her as a concubine and to go to bed with her. So what does the Quran say about the marriage of concubines? I think that's the first thing we need to establish. So there are several verses actually which speak about this. Surah 4, verse number 3, is most famous for the interpretation that it allows a man to have up to 4 wives. The same verse, however, also says, أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ, or what your right hands possess. And this is widely interpreted to mean that in addition to the 4 wives, which the Muslim scholars have placed as the upper limit based on their interpretation of this verse, a man could have a number of concubines, unspecified.
Wow.
Muhammad Asad, in his translation and commentary on the Quran in English, has looked at this, and he has pointed out something which should have been obvious to everyone, but is often overlooked. The verse says, "In khiftum alla tuqsitu fil yatama," if you fear that you will not do justice to the orphans, فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ. Marry those women who are suitable for you in 2s and 3s and 4s. وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدَةً. But if you fear that you will not do justice, then only one. Meaning, of course, marry only one. And then it continues, أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ, or what your right hands possess. So at this point, the Muslim interpreters would insert the thought that, or remain satisfied with what your right hands possess. But Muhammad Asad only needs to assume, not this long insertion of thought, but just simply the grammatical continuity of the verse. So it says, if you fear you will not do justice, then marry the women who are suitable for you in 2s and 3s and 4s. And if you fear even then that you will not do justice, then marry only one. Or marry what your right hands possess. So this leads to the understanding that, let's say, the Muslim community did go to war with others who, in that context at the time, when we did not have things like the Geneva Convention and other conventions for the treatment and humane treatment of prisoners of war and so on. How were the prisoners of war to be dealt with at that time? The prisoners of war were allocated as domestic servants within the society.
They were kind of integrated into
They were
society.
integrated into society. And in fact, many of them, especially the men, rose to positions of power even while they were servants within the community. They had been captives of war, but they rose to prominence as teachers and Quranic memorizers and so on. And the sons born to these women would also rise to prominence. I'm saying sons because this was a man's world. The women did not have so much of opportunity to excel and to become leaders in the society. But nonetheless, the point here is that in that society where the women were allocated as servants along with men, it was assumed by Muslim scholars that if a man owned a woman in that circumstance, he has the automatic right to sleep with her. But this Quranic verse is indicating that if you have such a woman in your possession, then marry her. Because the same verb, the verb that says marry in 2s and 3s and 4s, and then if you fear you will not do justice, then only one, the verb is implied. The then only one, it doesn't say marry only one. But everybody understands that it means marry only one. The verb marry is extended to that object, the one. But the same verb has to extend to what follows. أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. So marry one, meaning from among the free women, or one of those whom your right hands possess, or whoever your right hands possess. It could be multiple. Now, why would the Quran limit, assuming that it limits the men to 4 wives at one time, but then give them the permission to marry an unlimited number of concubines? A good explanation for that may be that in that circumstance, what do you do with the female slaves? If you leave them, they're separated from their families and from their husbands, if they had husbands prior to their being captured. If they are left single in this new society, in that situation when women did not have the kinds of protections which women can be presumed to have nowadays because of modern laws protecting the rights of women and so on, women may have become, in that situation, being in that vulnerable state, targets for abuse by other men who would see them as being unmarried and from their point of view, with sicknesses in their hearts, as the Quran describes some men, they might target these women. So if the women are known to be married to a particular man, in this case their master, then that would be a way of giving them protection. That would mean that the Quranic word muhsan, which is used in reference to married women in general, would now apply to them in particular. And muhsan in Arabic means something that is fortified, protected. So that would be the reason there. Now, I said if we assume that the Quran limits the number of wives to 4, this has been a common interpretation, but the Quranic verse does not really say that. Though, I'm comfortable with that interpretation because we can well imagine, as the Muslim scholars who reached that interpretation imagined, that it would be very difficult for a man to care for so many women all at once. But sometimes a thing is difficult, but nevertheless it is allowed in the law. It's not an ideal situation, but sometimes it is not necessary to make a law. And you know that things would naturally pan out. And because the number of men and women in societies have generally remained roughly equal, you can assume that in most situations, one man would be married to one woman, because that would be the natural pairing off. That would be the balancing of the male and female populations.
So, Dr. Shabir, is this the only verse that refers to marriage?
No. In the same surah, this is Surah 4 we're talking about, so that was verse number 3. In verse number 24, there is a mention that, well, let's start with verse number 23, because verse number 23 says, these are the categories of women whom you cannot marry, like, for example, your mother, your sister, and so on, obviously. And then verse number 24 says, wal muhsanatu minan nisa. Here we come to the same word, muhsanat, now in the plural, the fortified women. This would be women who are already married. إِلَّا مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ, except those whom your right hands possess. So now we can assume that some women who were previously married were captured in war. Now they're possessions of the Muslim community. So what's to be done? Can you marry them? Well, this verse says, وَالْمُحْصَنَاتُ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ إِلَّا مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَأُحِلَّ لَكُمْ مَا وَرَاءَ ذَلِكُمْ أَن تَبْتَغُوا بِأَمْوَالِكُمْ مُحْسِنِينَ غَيْرِ مُسَافِحِينَ. So these are the two categories. This category says, if the women are previously married, you cannot marry them now. But if they have been captured in war, you can seek them as well as unmarried women with your wealth. Meaning, just as a man would go propose to a woman today by, buying her a nice diamond ring, the custom at the time was that women generally did not own much property and did not have much opportunity for earnings of their own. So a good way to start the marriage would be, as part of the proposal, to say, okay, marry me and I will, give you this dower. So the Quran is saying, okay, so make this offer to the single women, but also the women who are the right-hand possessions, meaning the captives of war in that situation. Well, that was one of the categories. People might have been owned through a variety of other means, but the Islamic ethos said that we're not going to take free persons and make them into slaves. And in fact, this became forbidden in the Islamic society. And the only avenue open for the new supply of slaves was through the war situation in which captives were brought into the society. So if a captive was brought, a female captive, she should be sought in marriage by offering her a dower. Though, of course, it may be less, and maybe her freedom will be considered the dower itself. But nevertheless, the Quran is prescribing here marriage. And then the following verse, verse number 25 in the same surah, it goes more into detail about that, about a man marrying a female captive of war.
So, Dr. Shabir, what do you think are the implications of these verses on marriage? I understand there are more verses than just the ones that you mentioned. So is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing for concubines?
Well, it's a good thing for the female slaves in that instead of them being turned into concubines, they could be married off and be wives within the society. So, yeah, you mentioned the other verses. We could have mentioned Surah 2, verse 221. We could have mentioned Surah 24, verse number 32. But let's stick with this. So overall then, drawing a conclusion from this, we can say that the Quran is telling men to marry off those women who are there in their possession, either to someone else, or as an alternative, they could have married the concubines themselves. Married not to mix up terms, married the slave women themselves, rather than just simply assume that they have the automatic right to sleep with them. So seeing that general picture, we can now look at the flip side of some people thinking they're seeing verses in the Quran which indicate that a man has the automatic right to sleep with his slave girl and to take her on as a concubine, treating her as though she was his lawfully wedded wife.
Mm-hmm. So, Dr. Shabir, next time we'll look at the flip side, some verses that presume to allow Muslim men to have sex with their slaves.
So the interpreters presume.
Exactly.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Shabir.
Okay, welcome.
If you enjoyed this video, click like and subscribe. And please donate to support our work at QuranSpeaks.com.
Well, that's a very interesting video listening to Dr. Shabir, of course, describing, or shall I say, explaining if the Quran recommend marriages of concubine in the Quran. Of course, we have listened to this, and of course, these are things that Prophet Muhammad, bring solutions to things like that. That's 1400 years ago, and you'll bear with me that what happened 1400 years ago may be different to what that is happened in our dispensation now in 21st centuries. Reasons why I am saying so is that Jewelry probably during that time, of course, they have so many things that they can be able to do to be able to like cater for their children and all those things, and that makes him in a sense to feels like, of course, he advised them that of course they can do something like that, and that's why of course he did not say that you should marry four, but then he was like you should marry one, but if he feels you can take care of them, then you can marry four. So I feels like men in this 21st century are kind of abusing that very word. Instead of you to marry for love, marry for what you know you can take care of, what you know you can be able to tolerate. Instead, people end up instead marrying so many children, wives, having so many children, and at the end of the day, these children in a sense grow up and then the parent cannot be able to provide for them, and then make them in a sense to become nuisance in a sense in our society, and therefore promoting insanity in our society. This thing is both applicable to both the Christians and then also the Muslim, because when the reason why I am saying so is that with or without Islam, of course, Africans in a sense tend to be polygamous in a sense in nature, and then therefore most of the cultural belief is for some of them to marry more than one wives, and then therefore some of them did that and they were successful that time because of why they have a lot of lands, they have a lot of things that they are going to do to be able to take care of the children. But then at the moment, do they have the same thing? No, the answer is no. So now there are a lot of people that end up giving birth to a lot of children that they cannot be able to take care of, or they can be able to like kind of train them the way it's supposed to be as a husband, and then therefore, or as a man, therefore you give birth to all these children, and then some of these children don't really have something they are doing, and no wonder you see the rate of terrorism in a sense have so much in a sense increased. I am not saying that is the main reason, but I'm saying that this could be some of the reasons to why we have so much in a sense terrorism. So why not you just marry one? I don't have to say that like you need to give birth to as a lot of children as you know, but as for me, I wish that of course you just have at least 2, 3, 4 children. It's enough. Like, why do you have to burn so much? Well, therefore we have so much in a sense, we have limited in a sense resources. Even if you have in a sense a lot of resources, we have a lot of less privileges in a sense children in a sense who are in this that we can actually help. We don't have to give birth to people before we can help. I think that there should be so much blessings when you give out in a sense to even those kind of people, this kind of children. You raise them from those families, you understand, you train them educational wise and make them better people, you understand, in the society. I think that those ones, you understand, will be a blessing, you understand, to not just to their families but then also to you. The reason why I'm saying so is because if that a child, you understand, should grow and not raised, you understand, the right way, what happens is he is going to become a nuisance to the society and then become, you understand, a security threat to you, you understand, since, you understand, you have failed to do that. Because if that child is not doing anything so meaningfully that he can be able to like take care of himself, what do you think will happen at that point in time? Those are the kind of situations that they then normally take advantage of people, speak to them, whisper to them, and then you see them started doing this, stealing, doing this, trying to take things that does not belongs to them. Same thing is also applicable to the women. When it is the women, then maybe probably don't really have anything to do. Then you see some of them started going to the road doing prostitution in order to get something to take care of themselves. So we don't have to promote this kind of a thing, you understand, indirectly. Just marry one. I think it should be enough. Why do you have to marry much? And now we are looking at this in a sense as of that time, because there used to be a lot of wars, in a sense they wage war and then they take people captives, and that's when they have a lot of female slaves, right? But right now we do not have female slaves. I know that of course slavery still happen, but do in a different form. But now you understand, so why do you have to be having a lot of concubines? As a matter of fact, I did not even know. I was even thinking that it only stopped on the marriage, marry one or up to 4, but now it's saying that you're actually even having a countless, you understand, concubine. It means that you can have as many as you want. There's not even a limit to that, and that's why I'm saying that this kind of things happened 1400 years ago. To the first century, you don't have to have unlimited, you understand, concubine or countless, you understand, concubine. So the thing is, marry what you want. One is enough. Have, you understand, probably God can bless you with both the male and the female, and that's it. You don't have to marry at so many. Then for what? Like for what? For God's sake, like looking at, in a sense, some of the things that are happening in this world. That's why I said this advice was given based on what was happening in their dispensation. But in our dispensation, we are having a lot of limited resources, and these things in the other way around tend on to become a threat to the society. So why don't we just limit it, in a sense, for the sake of our society or for the sake of our children? How will we feel the time that we become old and then we see our children are not safe? So those are the things that we have to be thinking about, and not just about to think about our own self. Because if a man, just because you think you can be able to take care of 4 wives or with so many concubines, right? All those ones will end up having more than 20 or 30 children, right? How do you think that resources can be able to take care of those children? Or even if you die and those resources are shared within those children, what makes you think that those children are going to be successful and do what they are supposed to do in accordance to the word of God? There's a likely possibility that some of them will deviate. So why don't you at least reduce the number, make it a little, okay? Take care of them, train them as it's supposed to be. Do your best as a father, do your best, in a sense, as a mother, or as far as, or as a guardian, because I know that there are some who adopt children and then they live with them, they train them, okay, as their own guardian. So if you understand, you don't have to, understand, to overdo things. We don't have to create, understand, a lot of problems, understand, for ourselves, because that's exactly what that is happening to us, understand, precisely, understand, in Africa. We all do all these things and it's affecting us, and even our religion does not support all these things. Even though I know that in the Old Testament, of course, I know that God was speaking to the kings, understand, and then some of the leaders, understand, in the Bible. Rather, those are the ones God spoke most, and I know that a lot of them have so many wives. But then, nevertheless, we don't have to do it because of this is what that is or has happened. Or some will say, of course, check in the Bible, of course, some of the prophet marry, some of the priests marry. We'll talk about Elkanah, of course, he also married. We'll talk about Moses, of course, he have more than one wife, and so many of them. We'll talk about Solomon and the rest. Of course, we are fully aware, right? We are fully aware. But now let's try to look at it in a sense, is it really helping matters? Why not we try our best and at least marry one? Marry what you love and then stick to it and be committed into it. Why concubine? It's unnecessary. It's better. Well, anyway, let me not say much. I know that some of you have a total opinion concerning this, and I wanted to actually drop it at the comment section. Let's all have this dialogue together. So this is the end of my video. If you like my reaction, if you like, share and subscribe, and if you have any video you want me to react to, don't forget to drop it at the comment section and I'm going to check it out. So guys, you remain blessed, and I see you in my next video. Bye bye.